Hey guys, welcome back to Kapow. I'm Sonya. Now, if you hadn't already noticed, this episode is all about my favourite genre, crime noir.
It was a show like any other show, like a bad penny that keeps turning up until you add it to some other pennies and then buy a comic with it.
Ow. Ow. God, what are you doing? We're trying to do that intro.
The dame was getting nervous. I have that effect on dames. Should I have said something? That everything was okay, that we were in King's Comics doing a special episode because Sin City 2 just got released in cinemas? Nah, that's just what she expected me to say.
Okay, since Al appears to be having a stroke, I'll just push on. So we're going to have a look at 3 crime noir trades, each one more hard-boiled than the last. Starting off with Ed Brubaker's Scene of the Crime, then Volume 1 of Greg Rucka's Stumptown, and wrapping up with Sweets, a New Orleans crime story. You back with us yet, Al?
The rest of the show played out in my head like I'd seen it 1,000 times. I wanted to call it déjà vu, but I don't speak French, and that might actually be a type of salad. If it was, then I just hope they served it with the croutons on the side.
I'll take that as no, then. Well, Ray will be in to talk about a Sin City collectible, and then we'll be having a chat about the new movie that inspired this episode, Sin City 2, A Dame to Kill For. So, thanks for letting me do all the work, Al. Really professional.
You know what? I was just trying to land a little authenticity, but you know what? You wouldn't even understand. Let's just get started.
Pretty soon he'd get so frustrated he'd quit the show, and then I'd have Kapow all to myself.
Dude, you coming?
Yep. Sure.
Now, I think it would be fair to say that it simply wouldn't be possible to do a crime noir special without taking a look at least one Ed Brubaker book.
Yeah, you started off by saying that we should only look at Brubaker's work for this episode.
Yeah, and if you'll recall, you agreed with me.
Well, yeah, yes. But then our director pointed out that it would be a Brubaker special, not a crime noir special, but even he was tempted.
Yeah, but then we were left with the problem of picking just one. Luckily, deciding that Sean Phillips should also be involved did narrow it down a bit. In the end, we chose a series published back in 2000, the hard-edged thriller Scene of the Crime.
Phillips inked 3 out of the 4 in this series, with Michael Lark doing duty on pencils, and this was kind of the beginning of the Phillips-Brubaker team-up.
Yeah, now Scene of the Crime starts off very much by the numbers with the classic noir setup. You've got a private investigator and a missing girl, but then it starts to break the mold. For example, San Francisco is a very different backdrop for a noir story, but then its uncertain weather conditions give the opportunity for drastic changes in atmosphere.
The protagonist is also a change from the usual disgraced police officer or former soldier back from the war. Jack Harriman is a young guy who more or less stumbled into the private detective business after drug abuse nearly cost him everything. He's not that great in a fight, and he doesn't even like holding guns.
Not your standard gumshoe at all, especially when contrasted with his friend Steve, who much more closely resembles a traditional PI. But it's these twists on the formula that make Scene of the Crime such a great read, and brings a sense of reality to a well-used premise.
Yeah, and every character in this book has that stamp of believability on them. From Jack's crime photographer Uncle Nut to the tortured innocence of the missing girl Maggie Jordan. It's a tragic story, beautifully told, as every noir tale should be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, there's a kind of an honest conceit to the artwork, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Even when the scenes are drenched in sunlight, we still see that sharp contrast of shadow, reminding us of the darkness behind it all. Lark is very aware of the genre he's working in.
It's a great effort all round on the basic look of this gritty thriller, with dynamic motion and detailed facial expressions responsible for telling a lot of this story. I could read books like this over and over again, and I do, yeah. It's a massive buy from me.
Yeah, look, murder, drugs, conspiracy, all hiding behind smiling faces in the California sunshine. This one's a keeper. It's a big buy from me as well.
Hey Ray.
Hey Sonya, hey guys.
So tell us about the Sin City figures.
Okay, well, to celebrate the launch of Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, Diamond Select Toys have released a variety of 7-inch figures. Sculpted by Jean St. Jean, this first series includes Marv, Hartigan, and Nancy, all based on the 2005 feature film. Each figure comes packaged with a deluxe display base and accessories in a classic select display packaging that uses the spine to reference the artwork. So we've decided to take a look at the Marv character because out of the 3, this sculpt resembles the character best.
Yeah, so let's start with what's in the box.
Yes.
There's a small booklet that advertises various other Sin City items you can buy. Also included is a 2-part alleyway environment, the character Marv, sporting his leathers and trademark white singlet, and 3 accessories, a pistol, a hatchet, and the all-important jerry can of gas.
Or alcohol. Old Marv's got quite a thirst.
Look, can he actually hold the jerry can?
He can. But it doesn't look comfortable in his hand, and it's a fight to get him to hold it. Frankly, I'm surprised that the design of the left hand is so gnarled. If you weigh up having an interesting hand sculpt versus being able to wield 2 items at the same time, then the latter is going to be more interesting and dynamic. What if you simply want, your character to hold the primary weapon in the other hand, for instance?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
But the environment here has a lot of detail, though.
Yes.
There's a lot to it that helps set the scene. The grey brick wall has an old pipe that runs down it, spilling water onto the trash below. On the ground, the drain, broken bottles, and rat are a nice touch, but the tail of the rat looks really weird curled up like that.
Yeah, it is, but the environment is easy to assemble though.
Yep.
Now, let's break Marv down. He looks like the character, He looks solid and strong, and he has over 20 points of articulation. Most of the figure is made of a stiff PVC, while the coat appears to be a flexible PVC. I like that it swooshes away from the body. The flexibility of the coat allows the legs to be moved more easily without obstruction. The legs have some unique articulation elements. I didn't like the swinging pivot at the hip, that is, until you combine it with the movement in the groin axis, and then you get a much wider range.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. The knee doesn't go back to a right angle, but the ankle is surprisingly flexible.
Yeah, no, I thought it was only going to have a forward and backward movement, but you simply need to move the ankle forward for it to free the heel. Then the range is around 270 degrees. This torso movement doesn't really do much for me. I'd have preferred a twist at the hip instead.
Yeah, what about the arms?
Well, they're good, but they're nothing to write home about. The shoulder movement is restricted, a little by the coat and a little by the width of his chest, which prevents him from aiming the gun directly in front of him. The head sculpt is decent, and I think they've managed to get that duality of strength and that cheeky glint in his eye. What do you think of the figure overall, Sonya?
Okay, well, the paintwork has been smudged in a couple of places, but the figure has a lot of different textures and detailing, from the creases in his leather to the ribbed effect on his singlet. There's 2 studs on the base, but they don't seem to serve much purpose. I mean, yes, they will hold Marv, but it won't be the most interesting pose you can get from him. Overall, he's a good figure, but I'm only going to give him a borrow.
Cool. Well, when I was moving him around, I noticed that the coat kind of acts as a bit of a third leg. You can use it to balance him in positions that would otherwise be impossible, because the figure itself isn't the most well-balanced of toys. That said, aesthetically, if you're going to look at the toy, he's a bit rigid, but once you start moving and manipulating the toy around, a lot of the design elements start to shine. You get a lot more flexibility out of him. If you were going to purchase any of the toys in this line, I'd suggest getting hold of them and rotating the joints half a dozen times each, just to loosen them up a little bit. They won't break at all, because Diamond have done a decent enough job at overseeing the construction of these figures. So, look, I'm going to give them a borrow as well.
Awesome. Crime noir is a genre that relies heavily on conventions. The hero is always a disreputable character with a murky past who smokes, drinks, and always has a sarcastic comeback.
Yeah, and the women are almost always beautiful, but treacherous, always leading a hapless hero into danger.
Yes, and I love all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, but every so often it's nice to see the formula tweaked. In the case of Stumptown, written by Greg Rucka with art by Matthew Southworth, all the conventions are in place bar one. The lead character is a female.
And yet our hero, Dex Parios, follows every other entry in the Crime Noir rulebook. She's got a big mouth, a gambling problem, and constantly falls ass backwards into every kind of trouble imaginable.
I know, poor old Dex gets punched, pistol whipped, and straight up shot at almost every time she turns around. I don't know why, but we love seeing our noir PIs take a beating, and Stumptown does not disappoint in that regard.
And in the story in this first volume, The Case of the Girl Who Took Her Shampoo But Left Her Mini, it's 100% crime noir. Dex is heavily in debt to an Indian casino and gets tasked with finding the owner's runaway granddaughter as a way of clearing the debt.
And before she knows it, she's up to her neck in blackmail, death threats, crime bosses, and hired goons.
Hired goons?
Yeah, so there's nothing that new about the structure, but when it's done this well, there really doesn't need to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what did you think of the visuals?
Well, of course, the art style is essential to establishing tone in a noir story, and I think Southworth does a great job providing a sense of place. The city of Portland provides an excellent backdrop for this tale, and it feels almost like a character in itself.
Absolutely true. And joined on colours by Lee Lockridge and Rico Renzi, he gives us those rich blacks and stark colour changes that typify the genre. I will say, however, that at times the character faces could seem a little blank, and the scratchy style of the artwork could leave the anatomy feeling a little inconsistent as well. But overall, he does complement Rucker's storytelling style really well.
He does. Dex is a fantastic character, equally flawed and relentless. There's shades of Renee Montoya from Gotham Central or Jinx Alameda from Bendis' Noir series, but she has got a style all of her own. I really loved reading this, and it's a massive buy from me.
Yeah, look, I'm always going to be a sucker for this kind of setup. You've got a big mouth protagonist, you've got murder, you've got mayhem, you've got, best of all, hired goons.
Hired goons?
So it's definitely a buy from me as well.
So it's another week and another big screen comic book film has been released. Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. Sonya, your thoughts?
Well, look, I was a big fan of the original Sin City film and of the comics. I was really excited to come and see Dame to Kill For. I really enjoyed it. I did enjoy while I was sitting there watching it, but I feel like too much time has passed since Sin City. That's hard to say.
Yeah.
And so I felt like it was a little bit dated. My biggest problem was actually the pace of the film. In some parts it was really lagging and it was really slow, and other parts it was kind of juddering across, and you were never quite sure what was going.
Well, because it kind of starts
It
at
starts
full
in a big
acceleration,
boom,
doesn't it?
yeah.
With Marv stabbing a bunch of college kids.
Exactly.
And then, and then
never
just
gonna-
slows right down again
Yeah.
after that, and that's not a place
So
to
you're
start,
feeling
really.
you kind of motion sick with the pacing of the film. I thought the Dame to Kill For story was actually really very good. That was probably my favourite of the stories that were in this one. The other two, they were fine, but they didn't do anything for me. This is my biggest thing with Dame to Kill For, is that it didn't do anything for me. It was like, I've seen this formula, I've seen these characters. What's next?
Give me something.
Give me a little bit more. The violence as well. I like a good violent film whenever.
do, yeah.
But the violence in this was done so much, and it was so over the top. Every scene, something awful was happening to somebody else, that within 20 minutes, I was over it.
Well, with
and
how it started,
no
it felt like they were
impact.
making a point of it.
Exactly.
They were just going, bigger, badder, bloodier.
Yeah.
But-
and then that's great, but expect your audience to kind of give up
Tune
after
out
a
a bit,
while and
yeah.
tune out.
You become desensitized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a great scene in there with Miho, who's one of my favourite characters, that by the time I got to that scene, I was a bit kind of, people stabbing things, I don't care anymore. And then there's Eva Green, who's beautiful, and I love her as an actress, but I really feel like she was phoning this in.
Yeah.
Ava in the comics is amazing. She is a beautiful femme fatale with
The
that
ultimate femme
energy,
fatale,
the
really,
ultimate,
yeah.
the energy, the fragility and the brittleness and the fluidity of a femme fatale. She's got it. Eva didn't, which is really sad. She looked the part, but there was just nothing there.
There didn't seem to be much depth to what she was doing. It was
No.
like, now I'm being evil, now
Yeah.
I'm being vulnerable.
Exactly.
And it was very put on. It was
Yeah.
you were aware that she was doing it.
She was doing it. I
Yeah,
tell you
she
what, the
seemed to
highlight
waver
though,
a fair bit.
the
Yeah.
highlight of this film for me was Christopher Maloney. I thought he was fantastic
Yeah.
as Mort. It was just perfect for me.
He did even look like
He
the
even
character
looked
in the
like
book,
him.
didn't he? It was-
Although
yeah.
I always find it funny when I'm watching Christopher Maloney on set, because I just think he's
Law and
Elliot.
Order, yeah.
Elliot, what are you doing? But
Captain Cragen's not
he's
going to
not
be
going to
happy
be
with
happy.
you.
But yeah, so overall, yes, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't everything that I really wanted it to be.
Al?
Right, okay, well look, yeah, again, huge fan of the original, loved the first Sin City, and you can't help but compare it. I mean, it's the sequel, it's been a long time, but you got to compare it.
Gotta compare.
And it definitely comes off second best to a pretty broad degree. Most of my problems with this were structural. Just how the movie was put together didn't really work for me. You look at the first one, it's got 3 separate stories, 4 if you count the prologue,
Yep.
and they're very solid stories that feed into each other. You've got the Hardigan storyline that bookends the movie, and it's structured so perfectly. You've even got the assassin guy coming in at the end just to further bookmark
Yep.
it, or bookend it rather, and it all just works together. This one, Not so much.
No.
I mean, you've got the Dame to Kill For storyline, which works very well. They're really true to the original. There's so many frames that you're just like, yes, that's exactly, just the curve of her body is exactly like it was.
Yeah.
How she looks like she's cupping the moon in that one shot.
That was a good shot.
Exactly like it is in the comic. But then you've got the other two storylines, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's and Jessica Alba's, and they're a bit of a non-starter, both of them. There's nothing... I mean, you look at the original, they're textured, layered storylines that have a lot going on. And then you look at this one, you've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and not to spoiler, but he plays a game of poker, he gets beat up, he plays another game of poker. That's all that happens in his storyline. And then you end with Jessica Alba. Look, I'm sure she's a lovely woman, but she's not much of an actor. She's very attractive, and watching her dance... great.
A lot.
I'm on board with that. That's sort of like half of her screen time was that.
Yeah.
But then you got her sort of going a bit nuts and cutting on herself, and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
No.
You don't feel any impact. So that didn't work for me. I felt there were techniques that we used in the first film that we used badly in this one. Things like the colorization aspect. They just seem to be doing that at random. The twins show up, and Goldie and Wendy, and Goldie is in color like she was in the first film, but it was in the first film because that's how Marv saw her.
Yeah.
So doing that in this one makes
Made
no
no sense. If Marv's not in the room...
He's in love with her. Therefore, that's why she's colored, and that was symptomatic of the whole film. They just didn't seem to be connecting with why things were happening. And although, there was a lot of things that I loved about it, overall, it was a disappointment. It was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Well, look, I wasn't really sure what audience it was meant for. I felt sometimes it was a bit like a computer game, and sometimes it was an animation, and sometimes it was an actual film where they were trying to do something, really interesting stylistically. As you said, trying to match that comic book frame by frame was. I think was interrupted by the 3D aspect a little bit.
3D was a
with the
mistake for this, I
3D.
think. Because this is supposed to be, we want to see a moving comic book. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And this sort of went, oh no, now it's, that doesn't.
Then you're looking at a character with the backdrop, sort of almost the green screen, and just thinking, this not connected. That
cars just look like Matchbox cars being pushed along.
Exactly. And I thought it was a bit one note. The narration through all the stories was a bit, now this happens, and this
city will keep chewing you up and
terrible
spitting you
city.
out.
By the way, it's a
this
sin city. It's really bad.
A city of
so
sin.
much stuff is bad. In
Everybody
case you
hates
don't
it.
know, Sin City is a bad place.
We
for
know.
Sin. Sinful
And it's a city,
place.
by the way, also.
Yes.
With sin.
Yes, that's right. So it's
You get
a
the
pretty
point.
bad place.
Yeah.
What about, is it going to invite new readers to the comic book? Because there's a lot of fans of this comic. This is a
There
pretty
are
decent...
a lot of fans. Yeah, this
comic.
this is a big deal. Sin City is a big deal,
Yeah.
and I don't feel like this film will get any new readers coming to it.
Right.
I feel like they might, if they saw this but they hadn't seen the first one, it'll get people to go back to the first one, and then the first one will get them to come to the comics. But I think as a standalone film, no, I don't think it inspires
Yeah.
that kind of feeling.
No, I
Al?
tend to agree. Yeah, it might lead, as you say, it might lead people back to the first one, which will lead to the comics. I think the only thing that might get people to the comics specifically from this second one is that they'll go, oh, there's comics with this much nudity? And there's actually more. Nancy gets
More.
completely kid off
Yeah.
in the comics.
She does.
So, maybe if that's your thing,
Watch
check
out for
that out.
that.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, one word answers. Will it keep fans happy?
No.
No.
No, I don't think so either. And was she a dame to kill for?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. No, I look, not to kill for.
No?
No, I think Ava in the comics, definitely. Eva Green as Ava, maybe a swift kick to the dangles, but that's about it, really.
Okay. Al?
Okay, well, that's quite a vivid image. Look, maybe I cut someone up a bit. She's a dame to maim for.
Right.
But I wouldn't go so far as to actually kill. At least
All right.
as she is in the movie.
Yeah.
Okay, no. She's not dame to kill for,
How far would you go?
I'd be eating a sandwich across the road. That's how far.
Would you at least say a crossword or something?
No, I'd do a crossword while I'm eating the sandwich across the road, but
She's a
no.
dame to eat a sandwich for.
Yeah, whilst doing a crossword.
That's a long title.
Yeah, we put it in a subtitle or something.
Yeah, just
that's what we thought, and leave us your comments as to what you thought of the film.
The next stop on our crime noir tour of North America is Louisiana, where we take a look at a Kickstarter-funded project published by Image. Cody Chamberlain's Sweets, a New Orleans crime story.
Ah, New Orleans. The Crescent City, the Big Easy, old smoky armpit.
No, you really should have quit while you were ahead.
I don't know where I was going with that. But it does go to show you there are a number of things that we instinctively associate with New Orleans. You know, there's Mardi Gras, there's Dixieland Jazz, and more recently, there's the tragedy of Hurricane Katrina, which is an event that writer and artist Cody Chamberlain uses to great effect in this twisty serial murder mystery.
Yeah, and he uses it by relying on our knowledge of the event. The events of Sweets take place in the days just before Katrina makes landfall, and although the storm is referenced a number of times, no one but the reader knows just how bad it's going to be. This lends a Hitchcockian tension to the whole story.
Yeah, sure, because we know that within days all of the evidence will be just washed away.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the bodies keep piling up. The hero of our story is Detective Kurt Delate, a man still reeling from the sudden death of his daughter and further wounded by his wife leaving him. But with a series of seemingly random murders linked by a single clue, he has to pull himself together and find the connection. Call me a sadist, if you will, but there's nothing I like better than a really tortured protagonist.
But don't we all, though?
We do.
We do. Look, Chamberlain has produced a real labour of love here with a highly polished detective thriller. The banter between Kurt and his partner is rapid and enjoyable. The story is just as rapid and also unpredictable. But beyond that, I simply loved the art. From the cemeteries to the slums to the sun-baked streets, the atmosphere just sweats its way out of this book.
I was impressed by the art too, the washed-out sepia realism of the main story, and the switch in style when we go into a flashback and see through the eyes of a disturbed child. It's a very solid and enjoyable read with a sting in its tail that you will not see coming. I'm giving it a buy.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of surprises hidden away in this one. This book is a thinker, and you will probably want to start reading it all over again as soon as you're done. I really enjoyed this, and it's a buy from me as well. And with that, guys, we must leave behind the world of flatfoots, gumshoes, and stiletto-wearing femme fatales.
Yeah, there's a lot of foot-related stuff in Crime Noir.
Yeah, there is. Hadn't really thought of that before. Weird.
But we will be back before you know it.
Yes.
Our next episode will also be a special, this time coming at you from Oz Comic Con Sydney.
That's right, so break open the piggy bank, throw on your best Deadpool cosplay, because it's going to be a big one.
Huzzah!
And that's when they left me, alone and abandoned on the cold countertop.
In Australia, first you get the money, then you get the comics, then you get the...
Quiet, you fools. They're coming back.